Ale, great time to be Raul Jimenez. He breaks the record for most goals in a Premier League season by a Mexican player this past weekend with his goal for Wolves, now 14 on the season. As if that were enough, there's another link to a big club, this time Juventus, this time from Tuttosport, and they even have the deal in place. This is what it's going to be. Daniele Rugani, Federico Bernardeschi, and cash. Ale, for those of you keeping track at home, that's 2 Italian internationals and money for a Mexican international. Wolves apparently, though, want 50 million to 60 million euros for their man. Ale, put your GM hat on. Who gets the better end of this deal, Juventus or Wolves?
Before I put my GM hat on, I'm going to take your Mexican national team hat off of you and put it on me and acknowledge the fact that you have just made a whole big deal about Raul Jimenez scoring the goals that he has in the Premier League and saying the highest total for a Mexican in the Premier League, as if they're Mexican players flooding the Premier League over the years. I see what you did there. It is indeed a great time to be Raul Jimenez because there's a whole lot of news about you and people are talking about you. And if people are talking about you, it's because you are an appealing target. In terms of who gets the best of this deal, I'm going to say that actually both teams benefit. It's one of the rare deals in which you can make an argument in saying, you know what, there's a lot that makes sense for both clubs and for the players as well. In terms of the players, and let's address that for a second, when you consider Daniele Rugani and Federico Bernardeschi, these are 2 guys that will be and will continue, have been and will continue to be bench players for Juventus. They've had their opportunity to try to make their mark and see if they were going to be a first-choice starter, and they have not convinced. They have not done that consistently. And so, therefore, their roles within Juventus are well-defined. And that is, these are players that will give the team depth, an option off the bench, an option if somebody gets injured, just a couple of players that will be useful, but not counted upon to be the guys when it really matters. And so maybe a change of scenery for them too makes a whole lot of sense. And if they go to Wolves, you would assume that these are guys that are going to play every minute of every game. That would be the expectation anyways. As for Raul Jimenez, he would be walking into a situation in which I think a lot of the things that Raul Jimenez does well complement very well what Ronaldo wants to do at this point in his career. Because Raul Jimenez, although he's a guy that can score goals, is also a guy that has a lot of sacrifice in his movement, a lot of in-to-out runs, a lot of hold-up play, a lot of things that are unselfish in nature. And that complements, of course, the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo at this point in his career is going to stay more in a central position, which he's going to be the one finishing the chances. So a lot like what Karim Benzema was to Real Madrid and Ronaldo, maybe Raul Jimenez can play that Karim Benzema role for Juventus while Ronaldo continues to score the goals inside the 18-yard box.
Herc, Ale wanted me to take my Mexican national team, hat fan. Okay, it's off. Let me put it back on just for a second. Herc, we always talk about. That lasted a while.
Yeah.
We always talk about Mexican players in Mexico getting priced out of big moves to Europe, right? Because the market in Mexico, clubs aren't incentivized to sell. Are you worried when you hear Wolves says between 50 and 60 million euros for a guy they paid 35 to 40 million euros for just last year? They're going to price Jimenez out of that big move this summer.
No, I'm not worried. You look at his production. I mean, he's one of the most productive players in the Premier League. 23 goals, 10 assists in all competitions, 14 this year in the Premier League. Also, besides that Mexican player in the Premier League record, that's also a Wolverhampton record for goals scored in the Premier League. He's obviously very efficient. Ali already talked about the things he's good at when he doesn't have the ball. When he has the ball, how he can be productive for a player like Cristiano Ronaldo. I think right now for the Premier League, that's a decent price tag. Now, you include 2 players into that price tag, that's a whole nother thing. You're giving up a lot. I understand they're role players, but it's 25 and 26 years of age for a player that's going to be 30 soon, for a player that's had a year and a half, going on 2 seasons of productive football at top flight. Now, a very good year and a half, a very good almost 2 seasons where he's proven himself to be one of the most effective 9s in the world, a very good 9. He's getting recognized for his worth finally. I have no problem with the price point. Now, if it was a Mexican player within that Mexican territory or transfer market within that league, yes, I'd be worried. But here you have a Premier League player being priced at Premier League numbers because his worth shows that, because he's done enough to show that he merits that. So, no, I have no problem with that price tag.
Ale, do you sense my desperation here that he move on? Do you sense that there's a worry here that he might stay at Wolves? Look, he's 29 years old. These opportunities don't come very often. Do you think now is the time? He's got to go, because I don't see Raul Jimenez putting these numbers up for 2-3 more years and more chances. We're talking about the biggest clubs in the world right now after this guy. I'm worried his ship will sail.
And I'm sure he's very appreciative of the fact that you're worried about what his career is going to look like, that he is truly concerned, and he really takes in that appreciation that you have for him as a player. I think we've had this discussion about Raul Jimenez over the last couple of months, and the teams that were coming up, and the discussion that we were having was about Real Madrid and Barcelona. And I was very cautious in saying, you know what, don't think that that's quite the move. Even we talked about him moving into Spurs and taking the place of Harry Kane, and that was a little bit of a tricky situation as well. I do think that this move to Juventus makes sense, because Juventus at this point is moving away. You would suppose they're moving away from Higuain, and so there is a hole there that somebody's going to have to fill. And it's not like Higuain has been scoring goals left and right for Juventus over the last 6 months or so. So there is an opportunity there for Raul Jimenez to slide right in there. Another thing that I think we have to take into consideration when we talk about pricing out of yourself of the market is that it's not only what we consider to be the price point for Raul Jimenez. It's not only what we consider to be his market value, but what is the COVID market value of Raul Jimenez, and how that impacts the transfer market, not only for this player, but for players across the board. The numbers prior to the pandemic were ridiculous. People were throwing just ridiculous numbers for any player out there. And when you value a player now, I think you have to do so taking into consideration that is a different financial and economic market, not only for soccer, but across the world. And so it's important that whenever Wolves is at the very least considering their package deal, that they know, look, I don't know that we're going to be able to get that money that we're asking for Raul Jimenez. So that's why I think it makes sense for both clubs, because I think Juventus would be freeing up some space in terms of money with Bernardeschi and Rugani moving out. Then Raul Jimenez comes in, fills in a gap on the field, and Wolves will be getting two very serviceable players. Now, the question for Wolves is, how do they make up the difference for Raul Jimenez? And where do they go in terms of finding that talent in the attacking half? That's a different question, and that's a different subject that they have to address. But in terms of this deal, I think it does benefit Raul Jimenez. And to your point and your question, taking the long way around, I'll answer and I said, yes, this is the right time for Raul Jimenez. And I think it's the right time because of the circumstances on the other side, that Juventus need a guy like Raul Jimenez.
Herc, with the scrutiny we know the Mexican press is going to put on any Mexican player in his move or not move in Europe, what do you think the reaction would be if he didn't make the jump from Wolves now?
It would be catastrophic in Mexican press, but what else is not catastrophic in Mexican press? Here's my worry for Raul Jimenez, and I know a lot share the same sentiment, because there are a lot of these cheerleaders out there. Ale, I don't know if you believe this, but there are a lot of cheerleaders when it comes to the Mexican press. There are a lot of these guys that put on that Mexican hat, the Mexican national team jersey. They cover themselves with the Mexican flag. There are these people out there. My worry for Raul Jimenez, and a lot of those who are maybe taking a third-party view on this, is that the system works for Raul Jimenez. It didn't work at Benfica. It didn't work at Atletico. It's worked with Nuno Espiritu Santo. It's worked at the Premier League. It's worked with Wolves. What if he's being asked to be the man? Even though he's alongside Cristiano Ronaldo, you still have to pull your weight. You still have to be the man, so to speak. You have to cater to the man. What if that doesn't work for him? Where does then Raul Jimenez go from here? Because we've mentioned it's been a season and a half. We've mentioned that he's 29 years old and this is the first time in his career at a top flight level in Europe that he's been productive. This combined with the cheerleading and the loving of tearing down these idols that they create can be a very catastrophic little combo for Raul Jimenez if things don't go well.
Who are you talking about, Herc? I have no idea who you're talking about. I cannot imagine that we have this person around us.
We're not to the teardown yet.
Multiples, Ali.
Let's keep building them up. For now, 14 goals in the Premier League season, pretty good.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.